Hi guys, welcome back. It's time for part 12 of The Call of the Wild. We're almost to the last of the book. I think this one and one more and we'll be done. Alright. One night he sprang from sleep with a start. Eager-eyed, nostrils quivering, and scenting. His mane bristled in recurrent waves. That means that the hair on the back of his neck was up and down. From the forest came the call, or one note of it, for the call was many-noted. Distinct and definite as never before, a long, drawn howl, like, yet unlike, any noise made by husky dog. And he knew it, the old familiar way, as the sound heard before. He sprang through the sleeping Kank, and in swift silence dashed through the woods. As he drew closer to the cry, he went more slowly, with caution in every movement, till he came to an open place among the trees, and looking out saw, erect on haunches, with nose pointed to the sky, a long, lean timber wolf. It made no noise, yet it ceased from its howling and tried to sense his presence. Buck stalked into the open, half crouching, body gathered compactly together, tail straight and stiff, feet falling from unwanted care. Every movement advertised commingled threatening and overtures of friendliness. So it was both a threat and trying to stay friendly. So it was basically being cautious. It was the menacing truce that marks the meeting of wild beasts that prey. The wolf fled at sight of him. He followed with wild leapings in a frenzy to overtake. He ran him into a blind channel in the bed of a creek where a timber jam barred the way. The wolf whirled about, pivoting on his hind legs after the fashion of Joe, and all cornered husky dogs, snarling and bristling, clipping his teeth together in a continuous and rapid succession of snaps. Buck did not attack, circled him about, and hedged him in with friendly advances. The wolf was suspicious and afraid, for Buck made 3 of him in weight, while his head barely reached Buck's shoulder. Watching his chance, he darted away, and the chase was resumed. Time and again he was cornered, and the thing repeated, though he was in poor condition, or Buck could not so easily have overtaken him. He would run till Buck's head was even with his flank, when he would whirl around at bay, only to dash it away again at the first opportunity. But in the end, Buck's pertinacity, I think tenacity is better, was rewarded, for the wolf, finding that no harm was intended, finally sniffed noses with him. They became friendly and played about in the nervous, half-coy way with which fierce beasts belay their fierceness. After some time of this, the wolf started off at an easy lope, in a manner that plainly showed he was going somewhere. He made it clear to Buck that he was to come, and they ran side by side through the somber twilight, straight up the creek bed, into the gorge from which it is issued, and across the bleak divide where it took its rise. On the opposite side of the watershed, they came down into a level country with great stretches of forest and many streams, and through these great stretches they ran steadily, hour after hour, the sun rising higher and the day growing warmer. Buck was wildly glad. He knew he was at last answering the call, running by the side of his wood brother toward the place from where the call surely came. Old memories were coming upon him fast, and he was stirring to them as of old he stirred to the realities of which they were shadows. He had done this thing before, somewhere in the other and dimly remembered world, and he was doing it again, now running free in the open, the unpacked earth underfoot, the wide sky overhead. They stopped by a running stream to drink, and stopping, Buck remembered John Thornton. He sat down. The wolf started on toward the place from where the call surely came, then returned to him, sniffing noses and making actions as though to encourage him. The buck turned about and started slowly on the back track. For the better part of an hour, the wild brother ran by his side, whining softly. Then he sat down, pointed his note upward, and howled. It was a mournful howl, and as Buck held steadily on his way, he heard it grow faint and fainter until it was lost in the distance. John Thornton was eating dinner when Buck dashed into camp and sprang upon him in a frenzy of affection, overturning him, scrambling upon him, licking his face, biting his hand, playing the general tomfool, as John Thornton characterized it. The while he shook Buck back and forth and cursed him lovingly. For 2 days and nights Buck never left camp, never let Thornton out of his sight, followed him about at his work, watched him while he ate, saw him into his blankets at night and out of them in the morning. But after 2 days, the call in the forest began to sound more imperiously than ever. Buck's restlessness came back on him, and he was haunted by recollections of the wild brother in the smiling land beyond the divide, and the run side by side through the wide forest stretches. Once again he took to wandering in the woods, but the wild brother came no more, and though he listened through long vigils, the mournful howl was never raised. He began to sleep out at night, staying away from camp for days at a time, and once he crossed the divide at the head of the creek and went down into the land of the timber and streams. There he wandered for a week, seeking vainly for fresh signs of the wild brother, killing his meat as he traveled and traveling with a long, easy lope that seems never to tire. He fished for salmon in a broad stream that emptied somewhere into the sea, and by the stream he killed a large black bear, blinded by the mosquitoes, while likewise fishing, and raging through the forest, helpless and terrible. Even so, it was a hard fight, and it roused the last latent remnants of Buck's ferocity. And 2 days later, when he returned to his kill and found a dozen wolverines quarreling over the spoil, he scattered them like chaff, and those that fled left two behind who would quarrel no more. I think Buck is finally very wild. The blood longing became stronger than ever before. He was a killer, a thing that preyed, living on the things that lived, unaided, alone by virtue of his own strength and prowess, surviving triumphantly in the hostile environment where only the strong survive. Because of all this, he became possessed of great pride in himself, which communicated itself like a contagion to his physical being. It advertised itself in all of his movements, was apparent in the play of every muscle, spoke plainly as speech in the way he carried himself, and made his glorious fur coat, if anything, more glorious. So that they're saying that if you have pride in yourself, and you have a reason for the pride in yourself, it'll show through in your bearing. But for the stray brown on his muzzle and above his eyes, for the flash of white hair that ran most down his chest, he might well have been mistaken for a gigantic wolf, larger than the largest of the breed. From his St. Bernard father he had inherited size and weight, but it was his shepherd mother who had given shape to that size and weight. His muzzle was a long wolf muzzle, save that it was larger than the muzzle of any wolf, and his head, somewhat broader, was the wolf head on a massive scale. His cunning was wolf cunning and wild cunning, his intelligence, shepherd intelligence, and St. Bernard intelligence, and all this, plus an experience gained in the fiercest of schools, made him as formidable a creature as any that roamed the wild, a carnivorous animal, living on a straight meat diet. It was in full flower, the high tide of his life, overspilling with vigor and virility. When Thornton passed a caressing hand along his back, a snapping and crackling followed the hand, each hair discharging its pent-up electricity at the contact. Ooh, static electricity. Every part, brain and body, nerve, tissue, and fiber, was keyed to the most exquisite pitch, and between all the parts there was a perfect equilibrium or adjustment. To sights and sounds and events which required action, he responded with lightning-like rapidity. Quickly as a husky dog could leap to defend from attack or to attack, he could leap twice as quickly. He saw movement or heard sound and responded in less time than other dogs required to compass, and the mere seeing of hearing. He perceived and determined and responded in the same instant. Point of fact, the three actions of perceiving, determining, responding were sequential, but so infinitesimal were the intervals of time between them, they appeared simultaneous, which means usually these actions have to happen one after the other, but he did them so quickly it seemed like they happened all at once. His muscles were supercharged with vitality and snapped into place sharply like steel springs. Life streamed through him in splendid flood, glad and rampant until it seemed that it would burst him asunder in sheer ecstasy and pour forth and generously over the world. "Never was there such a dog," said John Thornton one day, as the partners watched Buck marching out of camp. "When he was made, the mold was broken." "By jingo, I think myself," Hans affirmed. They saw him marching out of the camp, but they did not see the instant and terrible transformation which took place as soon as he was within the secrecy of the forest. So you see here, here's Buck. And there's the wolf, so he is a lot bigger than the other wolves. They saw he no longer marched. At once he became a thing of the wild, stealing along softly, cat-footed, and passing shadow that appeared and disappeared among the shadows. He knew how to take advantage of every cover, to crawl on his belly like a snake, and like a snake to leap and strike. He could take a ptarmigan from its nest, that's a type of bird, I hope, like kill a rabbit as it slept, and snap in mid-air, the little chipmunks fleeing a second too late for the tree. Fish in open pools were not too quick, nor were beaver mending their dams too wary. He killed to eat, not from wantonness, but he preferred to eat what he killed himself. So lurking humor ran through his deeds, and it was his delight to steal upon the squirrels, and when he all but had them, to let go, chattering in mortal fear to the treetops. As the fall of the year came on, the moose appeared in greater abundance, moving slowly down to meet the winter in the lower and less rigorous valleys. Buck had already dragged down a stray part-grown calf, but he wished strongly for larger and more formidable quarry. He came upon it one day on the divide at the head of the creek. A band of 20 moose had crossed over from the land of streams and timbers, and chief among them was a great bull. He was in a savage temper, and standing over 6 feet from the ground was as formidable an antagonist as ever buck could desire. Back and forth the bull tossed his great palmated antlers, branching to 14 points and embracing 7 feet within the tip. His small eyes burned with a vicious and bitter light, while he roared with fury at the sight of Buck. From the bull's side, just forward of the flank, protruded a feather arrow end, which accounted for his savageness. Guided by that instinct which came from the old hunting days of the primordial world, Buck proceeded to cut the bull out from the herd. It was no slight task. He would bark and dance about in front of the bull, just out of reach of the great antlers and of the terrible splay hoofs which could have stamped his life out with a single blow. Unable to turn his back on the fanged danger and go on, the bull would be driven into paroxysms of rage. At such moments he charged Buck, retreated craftily, luring him on by a simulated inability to escape. But when he was thus separated from his fellows, 2 or 3 of the younger bulls would charge back upon Buck and enable the wounded bull to rejoin the herd. There is a patience of the wild, dogged, tireless, persistent as life itself, that holds motion for endless hours, the spider in its web, the snake in its coils, the panther in its ambuscade. This patience belongs particularly to life when it hunts its living food, and it belonged to Buck as he clung to the flank of the herd, retarding its march, irritating the young bull, worrying the cows with their half-grown calves, and driving the wounded bull mad with helpless rage. For half a day this continued. Buck multiplied himself, attacking from all sides, enveloping the herd in a whirlwind of menace, cutting out his victim as fast as it could rejoin its mates, wearing out the patience of creatures preyed upon, which is a lesser patience than that of creatures preying. As the day wore along, and the sun dropped to its bed in the northwest, the darkness had come back, and the fall nights were 6 hours long. The young bulls retraced their steps more and more reluctantly to the aid of their beset leader. The downcoming winter was harrying them on the lower levels, and it seemed they could never shake off this tireless creature that held them back. Besides, it was not the life of the herd or of the young bulls that was threatened. The life only of one member was demanded, which was a remote interest in their lives. And in the end, they were content to pay the toll. As twilight fell, the old bull stood with lowered head, watching his mates, the cows he had known, the calves he had fathered, the bulls he had mastered, as they shambled on at a rapid pace through the fading night. He could not follow, for his nose leaped the merciless fanged terror that would not let him go. 300 weight more than half a ton he weighed. He had lived a long, strong life full of fight and struggle. At the end, he faced death, the teeth of a creature whose head did not reach beyond his great-knuckled knee. From then on, night and day, Buck never left his prey, never gave it a moment's rest, never permitted it to browse the leaves of trees or the shoots of young birch and willow, nor did he give the wounded bull opportunity to slake his burning thirst in the slender, trickling streams they crossed. Often, in desperation, he burst into long stretches of flight. Such times Buck did not attempt to stay him, but lopped easily at his heels, satisfied with the way the game was played, laying down when the moose stood still, attacking him fiercely when he strove to eat or drink. The great head dropped more and more under its trees of horns, and the shambling trot grew weak and weaker. He took to standing for long periods, with nose to the ground and dejected ears drooping limply. And Buck found more time in which to get water for himself, and in which to rest. At such moments, panting with red lolling tongue and with eyes fixed upon the big bull, it appeared to Buck that a change was coming over the face of things. He could feel a new stir in the land, as the moose were coming into the land of other kinds of life were coming in. Forest and stream and air seemed to palpitation with their presence. The news of it was borne in upon him, not by sight or sound or smell, but by some other and subtler sense. He heard nothing, saw nothing, yet knew that the land was somehow different, and though its strange things were afoot and ranging, and he resolved to investigate after he had finished the business in hand. At last, at the end of the 4th day, he pulled the great moose down. For a day and a night he remained by the kill, eating and sleeping, turn and turn about. Then, rested, refreshed, and strong, he turned his face toward camp and John Thornton. He broke into a long, easy lope and went on, hour after hour, never at loss for the tangled way, heading straight home through a strange country with a certitude of direction that put man in this magnetic needle to shame. So Buck has gotten so strong and savage in the wild that he was able to take out a moose bull. Over a ton of moose. That's a big kill. All right, we'll see what happens in the last and final chapter. Talk to you later.